You ever been so deep underground the silence starts whispering to itself? That's where this started. Below the relic vaults, below the old wine cellars, below even the saints, rotting politely in their marble boxes. A chamber carved in sweat and soot, candles clinging to their last breath like they knew what was coming. I wasn't there when it happened. But I've read the blood, interviewed the walls, and the kid, he saw it all. The way he tells it, Heliarch Velix was shouting at a ghost. "I don't care what promises you made," Velix roared. He stood at the center of the room, robes twitching like they had nerves of their own. The light bent around something just beyond the reach of the flame. A figure that didn't belong. No outline, no edges. Just wrong, like a shadow drawn by a lunatic with a broken hand. "You'll never get access to the cathedral," he spat. "I'll bury every name, every record. No one will remember the white embers. Not even the Arcanum will know where to start looking." The thing didn't speak. Didn't need to. There's a kind of silence that doesn't just sit in a room. It hunts in it. In the doorway, curled up like a mistake, was Neris, a choir boy. No older than 13 maybe, knees to his chest, rosary broken in his fist. He wasn't supposed to be there, but fate's a bastard and timing's its blade. He'd heard the shouting and followed the echo. Curiosity always finds the kids first. Then Velix froze, his voice cracked. Fear slid into his throat and wouldn't let go. "No," he whispered. "No, wait." That's when the thing moved. No footsteps, just a shift in pressure, like the room exhaled and forgot how to breathe. Velix's spine snapped back like he'd been yanked by invisible wire. His mouth opened, but all that came out was wet air. And then, pop, pop. His eyes tore right out of his skull, nerves and vessels trailing behind like they were trying to escape with them. They hit the floor soft, like fruit dropped from a high place. The Heliarch lifted off the ground, flipped upside down like a hog at slaughter. Hung there, twitching. No rope, no hook, just will. Someone else's. Then came the cut. His throat opened, slow and clean, like someone unzipping a lie. The blood poured out thick and dark, black, not red. It ran down his face, soaked the collar of his robes, dripped in fat, lazy arcs onto the stone below. Neris didn't scream. He couldn't. The kind of fear he felt. You can't scream through it. Your body just forgets how to be loud. He stared, and the thing stared back. No eyes, no mouth, just a hollow where a face should have been, an absence wearing a man's shape. Then it moved. It leapt at him. And the candles, all of them, died. Light fled the room, and the dark swallowed everything whole. The rain was coming down hard, a godless kind of rain. The kind of rain that makes you feel like God's trying to scrub the filth off his city and giving up halfway through. The cathedral took it in silence. Faded gold spires dripped rust. Stained glass saints stared out with bleached faces and cracked eyes, color long since washed away. The old doors were swollen with water, warped like they'd spent too long holding back rot. They used to call this place sacred. Now it just looked like a grave, still pretending to be a church. I lit a cigarette beneath the arch and told myself I wasn't here for confession. Cathedrals always smell like someone's trying to hide something. Frankincense, rose oil, wet stone. It's not holiness. It's perfume on a corpse. The marble floor was polished like a mirror. Too clean for a building this old. I could see myself reflected in it as I walked in. A long coat dripping shadows, a jaw clenched from too many years of bad news. They didn't want me here. Not the guards standing at the threshold, not the silent choir of statues judging me from the alcoves, and sure as hell not the clergy. But orders had come down from the top. And when the arcanum sends you into a church, they aren't asking for permission. I made my way through the nave, boots wet and loud. Every step echoed like a slap in the face to tradition. Waiting for me beneath a broken stained glass window was a priest barely old enough to shave. Callum. His vestments looked like they belonged to someone twice his size. His eyes kept flicking to the puddles under my boots like I was dripping poison.
Inspector Baltimore.
Voice like a choir boy who didn't sleep. The speaker was Candlefather Callum Solivane, hunched over like a worn-down lamp. Looked like he could cry if the wind turned on him. Take me to the body. I had no time for pleasantries.
Spectre, Candlefather Grelm asked me to...
I gave him a stare that made him remember his own father. He bowed and led the way. They say churches are built to lift your eyes to heaven. This one kept mine trained on the dark. The nave was quiet, save for the crackle of ebon logs and the low sobs of candle mothers tucked into the far corner. Women in black robes huddled like mourning crows, their tears catching firelight as it danced along the pews. The air had a rich, robust smell of smoke and fruit. There were no hymns, just the flicker of candlelight, straining to hold back the shadows. Everything above the altar was swallowed in darkness, the ceiling lost in a hush no one dared break. As I followed, I caught sight of two officers in dull gray uniforms standing near the sanctuary doors. Local police. They stiffened when they saw me. The younger one muttered something under his breath. They'd been the first on scene, but once the Arcanum claimed jurisdiction, they were cut out, left to stew in their own resentment like spoiled meat. Their eyes followed me as I passed. Not with curiosity, with professional hate. I didn't return the favor. They'd get over it, or they wouldn't. Either way, it wasn't my problem. Callum opened a heavy stone door near the apse, thick hinges groaning under centuries of use. A gust of colder air slid out, smelling of limestone, old bone, and the kind of damp that never dries.
We'll need a lantern,
he said. Callum, silent as ever, lit one and handed it to me, the flame flickering behind stained glass panes. A pale yellow glow spilled out, casting long shadows across the stones. I stepped into the passage. The catacombs took us in like a secret too long kept. The walls narrowed, the air thickened. Dust and damp clung to my coat like fingers. We moved single file, the lantern carving a tunnel of light through the dark. The deeper we went, the more ornament gave way to stone. Carvings faded, candles vanished. All that remained were niches carved into the walls, each holding golden reliquary boxes, stacked and sealed like holy filing cabinets. Dead saints, heliarchs, the dead who mattered, all tucked away in boxes brighter than the lives they left behind. I watched the names pass, most too long, most too proud. Callum walked ahead like he knew the way blind. Eventually, the passage opened into a low, domed chamber. The floor turned to cobblestone, slick underfoot, old as the bones it guarded. A lantern hook swung gently from the ceiling, already used, already empty. This was the place where the heliarch had died, where the air still buzzed with silence, and I was here to speak with it. The lantern's glow crawled up the walls, flickering across gold-lined reliquary boxes stacked like trophies, each one sealed with old wax and older names. But none of that held my attention. Not compared to the body. It hung there, suspended mid-air, upside down, like an invisible rope had cinched tight around the ankles and refused to let go. No bindings, no hooks. Just a levitating corpse, gently swaying in the cold breath of the crypt. Velix, what was left of him. His robes dangled downward, soaked through at the hem. His face was gray, drained of all color, like the blood hadn't just left his body but taken his soul with it. The skin stretched tight across the bone, eyes missing, just sockets, empty and raw. His throat was open, a precise, elegant cut running from one side to the other. The kind of wound that was personal or practiced or both. The blood had poured out black, thick as tar, and hardened in streaks down his inverted neck like frozen oil. Beneath him sat a ceremonial obsidian bowl, etched with runes I didn't recognize. Not Solarian, not standard. It had overflowed. Blood, black, dry, viscous, had spilled over the rim, pooling onto the cobblestone below. It seeped between the cracks like it was trying to escape, like it had someplace better to be. No one's moved him. Good. I stepped closer, letting the lantern light stretch up over the ceiling and cast Velix's shadow, long, upside down, twitching with the sway of his corpse. You don't see something like this, I muttered, unless someone wants you to. I just stared, trying to decide whether I was looking at a murder or a message. Callum circles himself, whispering a private prayer. I didn't return the gesture, just pulled out my slate and started asking the questions they always hate to answer. What was the victim's full name and title?
Heliarch Velix,
He said.
Heliarch of the Church of Sol. He ran this cathedral, all of it.
I know what a heliarch is. I snapped at the priestling. When was the last time you saw him alive?
Dinner.
Callum muttered.
He didn't eat much, just broth and bread. Sat quiet through the whole meal. Left before the others. Said he had private prayers.
What was he doing here at this hour?
I don't know.
Who discovered the body?
I did.
Callum whispered. His knuckles went white around the hem of his robe.
I came back when I heard something. Cries. I thought he was chanting, but when I opened the door...
He stopped there, eyes wide. Voice gone. I didn't push. Did the victim have any enemies? Callum blinked like I'd slapped him.
No, everyone loved him. He gave to the poor, took in refugees, was building a school for war orphans, but...
A pause. Something unsaid. But...
Some of the clergy thought he was doing too much.
Was anyone else in the cathedral tonight? Just us. A few priests, the candle mothers, choir boys. After supper, most went to their cells. Only Velix stayed behind. Any recent threats, letters, visitors? Callum hesitated. His eyes flicked down, then up.
There was a courier, earlier this week. Said he came and left a sealed cylinder for the Heliarch. A sigil I didn't recognize. I never saw it again.
Is there a record of Velix's private appointments?
There should be. He kept everything in his desk, locked, in his chambers.
I closed my e-pad with a click and fades away in my hand. Then I'll need the key.
I don't have it.
Then take me to someone who does. Callum swallowed, then said very quietly,
There's someone you should speak to first.
Go on.
A witness?
My eyes narrowed. There was a witness to this?
Neris,
He said.
one of our choir boys. He saw it happen.
I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I looked down again at the perfect floor, watching my own face ripple in the reflection like it was thinking something I wasn't saying. Where is he?
He's upstairs in his chambers.
Why wasn't he sent to the hospital for evaluation?
The candle father asked me to seal him away.
Fools, take me to the boy. They should have sent Neris to a hospital. Should have had him in a sterile room with white walls and a clean bed, monitored by a psyche eval team, and sedated until the screaming stopped. But this was the church. And the church didn't like hospitals. Too many questions. Too many doctors with collars instead of degrees. Too many opportunities for someone to write something down in a ledger they didn't control. No, better to keep the boy locked up in a cell upstairs, like secrets you don't want to bury, just forget. Damn fools. But that's always been the way with them, more afraid of scandal than damnation, more eager to keep their robes clean than their conscience. I followed Callum back up the way we came, the lantern still flickering against damp walls. The air changed the higher we climbed, less death, more rot. Like the stones themselves were fermenting in guilt. We passed through the inner cloister, where the public wasn't allowed, and the stairwell opened into a long corridor lined with prayer rooms and dormitory cells. That's when I heard it. A voice, low and aimed. Demonium Artis. I turned just enough to catch a glimpse of the speaker. One of the local officers, uniform half wrinkled, pride fully intact. Magic fiend. Cute. I didn't stop walking. Didn't give them the satisfaction of a reaction. You don't wrestle with pigs. Not when you've got bigger messes to clean. But I didn't have to wonder long where that little insult came from. At the top of the next landing, he was waiting. Warden Alric Dens. Broad-shouldered, iron-gray hair. The kind of face that looked like it had chewed steel and liked the taste. He used to run this city's serious crimes unit until the case got elevated and the Arcanum pulled rank. Baltimore? He said, like he was testing if the word would make him sick. Dens, I said. Still brooding down here in the dark? Or did someone cut off your leash again? He stepped forward, eyes hard. You shouldn't be here. This was my case. Not anymore. I had men on this. I had statements. A chain of evidence. You lost the case, Dens. Now you're just making noise and wasting my time like a child who thinks throwing a tantrum counts as police work. He didn't answer. We stared at each other long enough to let the air go cold again. You Arcanum types, he said, always think jurisdiction means you own the truth. I smiled, dry. No, I just know how to find it. Callum shifted awkwardly behind me.
Inspector, shall we?
I didn't say anything else, just kept moving. We passed more dormitory cells, each one small, spare, clean in that holy way that feels more like punishment than peace. White linens, worn books, cracked tiles that had been mopped more times than they'd been fixed. Callum stopped at a heavy wooden door with a brass handle shaped like a flame.
This is it,
he whispered.
Neris is inside.
I put my hand on the knob and paused. The room was a cell in all but name. Small, square, and carved out of sorrow. No windows, just stone walls stained dark with candle smoke, and a single slit near the ceiling that let in no light. Only the sound of distant rain. The door shut behind me with a soft thud, and I felt the weight of the church press inward. Neris was in the corner. He wasn't sitting. He wasn't standing. He was crouched, coiled, really, his back hunched like his bones were too scared to straighten. His fingers worked the stone wall in slow, trembling strokes. Painting. Not with ink, not with charcoal, with something darker, slicker, blood maybe, or something close. The light from my lantern cast long shadows across the wall. That's when I saw it. His drawings. Hundreds of marks layered on top of each other. Circles, broken suns, weeping eyes. And in the center of them all, a figure without a face. A void, shaped like a man. "Neris," I said, keeping my voice low. He didn't move. "Neris, I'm not here to hurt you. I just need to know what you saw." No answer. Just that same slow painting. Over and over, like he was trying to trap the shadow in the stone. I stepped closer. "Did you see who did it?" He stopped, just for a moment. Then, without speaking, he dipped his fingers and began again, this time with intent. Slow, deliberate. He drew the faceless shadow, tall, robed, no eyes, no mouth, just the hollow. The same shape from before, and beneath his breath, he whispered. Soft, rhythmic, a prayer or a curse. I leaned in. Most of it was nothing. Garbled syllables strung together like cracked glass. But one phrase stood out. White ember, barely audible. But there. I pulled out my arcanum compass, let it hum to life in my palm. The runes sparked softly as I held it near him, and the needle twitched. Faint reaction, minimal aura distortion. But there was something off. No child should trigger an echo reading, not unless their soul had been bruised by something bigger than pain. I backed away, called through the doorway. "Callum, get in here." He entered, uncertain, hands twitching at his sides. "This boy doesn't belong in a stone room behind a locked door," I said. "He belongs in a psionic ward. Now, full evaluation, I want his memories scanned, every thought, every dream." Callum hesitated. "Move, priest." "That's an order." He nodded and vanished. I stayed a moment longer, watching Neris continue his painting. It was a rough outline of the cathedral, just lines and shapes, nothing detailed. But the shadows were heavy, stretching long from every corner of the building like they had weight. And in those shadows, almost hidden, was the shape, a man with no face, drawn over and over again. Small, still, watching. And just before I turned to leave, I looked down. My reflection was there, clear and sharp in the glass-like floor. But Neris's? Nothing. No flicker, no shimmer, no shadow under him. Like the boy wasn't really sitting there at all. I stood outside the church as the rain came down like judgment, cold and steady, washing the soot off the spires and revealing the rust underneath. The ambulance was pulled up just past the cathedral gates. Its lights cast a pale blue glow across the cobblestones, turning the stained glass into fractured veins of color. They wheeled Neris out in silence. He didn't scream. He didn't fight. Just stared at the sky like he wasn't sure it was real. A pair of medics strapped him in. One of them glanced at me, as if expecting me to say something official. I didn't. They closed the doors and drove off, the engine echoing down the wet stone alleys like a fading heartbeat. I lit a cigarette under the awning. Let the smoke fight with the rain. watched the spires disappear into the mist again. Behind me, the church loomed quiet and smug, like it had buried another sin successfully. Callum stepped beside me.
"Inspector,"
he said.
"Candlefather Grelm would like to speak with you, in private."
I didn't look at him, just flicked the ash off my cigarette. Lead the way. The door to the Candlefather's office opened like a reluctant confession. Thick oak, polished brass handle, sounded expensive, but felt hollow. The room beyond was exactly what I expected from a man like Grelm Tavaru. Clean, self-important, and built like a mausoleum for ego. Shelves lined every wall, stuffed with memory cylinders of divine manuscripts and ledgers stamped with seals that hadn't meant a damn thing since the Nine Seraphim War. The far wall was taken up by an enormous stained glass circle depicting Sol Invictus, all light and judgment and perfect symmetry. A relic from when people still believed. The desk was big, wide enough to stage a trial on. Mahogany, I'd guess. Varnished to a mirror sheen. Not a single quill out of place. The rug beneath it, red, thick, old-world craftsmanship, probably worth more than half the food kitchens in the outer wards. Which made what I did next feel even better. I stepped in without knocking, and rainwater from my coat started dripping straight onto that rug. Slow, deliberate, drip, drip, drip. Let the holy threads drink the gutters of the city. Grelm Tavaru stood behind the desk like a statue that had forgotten how to move. Tall, rigid, dressed in ceremonial vestments of black and bronze, the colors of a full-ranking Candlefather. The fabric was a heavy silk linen blend, expensive, tailored, trimmed with golden sunbursts and embroidered flame motifs that curled around his cuffs and collar like smug little tongues of judgment. He wore a thick medallion at his chest, the cincture of faith, engraved with the words Lux Dominatur, light rules. I'd seen 100 priests dressed like that. But Grelm wore it like armor. His face was as dry as his robes, sharp cheeks, cold eyes, mouth like a blade pressed tight.
"Inspector Baltimore,"
he said, like I'd tracked mud across the Ark of the Covenant.
"You could have wiped your coat."
I could have, I said, without smiling. Didn't. He didn't offer a seat. I didn't ask for one. I took a slow look around the room. An office designed to make someone like me feel small. Tall windows framed in stone, candle sconces shaped like open hands. The only warmth came from the hearth in the corner, where a fire had been allowed to die sometime this morning. Now it was just embers and the smell of ash. I pulled out my slate and started asking questions. I didn't ease into them. When was the last time you saw Heliarch Velix alive?
"This morning,"
Grelm said, voice clipped.
"He conducted the sunrise rites as usual. Devout, punctual, nothing irregular.
What was he doing down in that room?
Communing with the Heliarchs of the past.
He thought he could speak with the dead.
Our sepulchre of memory is isolated, shielded by the murmuration of the outside world."
I leaned in, the scent of incense and dried rose clashing with the smoke curling from my cigarette. "That's stupid," I said. "There's no shield against the echoes of the damned." Grelm shook his head slightly. "Did he have enemies?" Grelm's eyes tightened a fraction.
"None he would name. But he courted resistance. He believed too much in compassion and not enough in the budget."
Clarify that.
"He gave freely, opened our coffers to feed the poor, shelter the faithless, fund education for orphans. He bled this cathedral nearly dry. We've lost 3 satellite sanctuaries in the past 2 fiscal cycles.
He didn't say fiscal like a man of faith. He said it like an accountant. Was anyone scheduled to meet him tonight?
No one. He made it clear he wanted solitude, and unlike some, we respected his position.
Do you keep records of his visitors?
He kept his own logs, locked drawer, his chambers.
I took a slow walk around the office, letting more rain fall off my coat onto the rug, letting Grelm see every drop. You and Velix didn't get along. He met my eyes.
We had our differences.
That's a polite way of saying you hated the man's guts.
He was reckless with the church's future.
And now he doesn't have one. That hit harder than I meant it to. We stood in silence. His knuckles whitened around a quill. My e-pad evaporated from my hand. I'll need access to his chambers.
That area is sealed,
He said.
until the ecclesiastic board grants writ.
Yeah? I said, turning toward the hall. Tell them I said thank you for the delay. He stepped around the desk.
You're overstepping, Inspector.
I kept walking. He followed.
Don't forget, this cathedral still belongs to the church.
And don't forget, I said over my shoulder, the Arcanum owns every inch of space touched by magic, including murder scenes. He didn't like that, but he followed anyway. Because for all his robes and titles, scandal scares them more than heresy. The old cathedral was all long halls and longer memories, each stone block soaked in centuries of incense and lies. The deeper we went, the more it felt like the building itself was trying to forget something. Candlefather Grelm was close on my heels, robes whispering behind me like they were warning me to turn back.
You need writ for this,
He said again, voice tight as a noose.
You're violating sacred protocol.
I didn't stop walking. Then write it down and file it in the box where I keep things I don't give a damn about.
Inspector, this is a breach of ecclesiastic process.
I threw a glance over my shoulder. You want to threaten me with church action? Go ahead. But last I checked, the Emperor's faith was thinning. The only thing keeping this cathedral standing is paranoia and your fear of scandal. He didn't respond, but his silence was the kind that vibrated in the walls. Callum trotted ahead nervously, leading the way like a dog caught between 2 angry owners. His robes flapped as he walked, and he kept his eyes on the floor, like looking at me too long might be heresy. We reached the Heliarch's private quarters. Before we got there, I saw movement. Quick, coordinated. Candle mothers, at least 3 of them, slipping out of the Heliarch's door like mice abandoning a wholly sinking ship. Arms full of linens, memory cylinders, and glass flasks. I stepped straight into their path. What the hell do you think you're doing? One of them froze, mid-step. The others paused behind her. She bowed stiffly.
Preparing the Heliarch's chambers for post-mortem cleansing.
With memory cylinders.
The Heliarch's writings must be preserved for divine review.
I cut her off with a look sharp enough to flay. This is an active murder investigation, not spring cleaning. Drop what you're carrying and leave. They didn't argue. Just slipped past like shadows and vanished down the corridor, the scent of lavender oil trailing behind them. I stepped into Velix's chambers. It was colder than I expected. Not the cold of a draft, but the kind of still suffocating chill that settles in after a body's been taken out. Everything was in its place, too much so. The bed made, the curtains drawn, the candles trimmed to uniform height. It wasn't decorated, it was curated. Grelm and Callum stood just inside the door, watching me like vultures hoping I'd find nothing and leave. I didn't oblige them. "Tell me about him," I said. Callum spoke first, quietly.
He fed the poor. He opened the gates to the homeless, took in children who lost their families during the 9 Seraphim War. He was trying to build a school, one with food, beds, books.
I nodded. "And you?" I asked, looking at Grelm.
I opposed most of it,
He said bluntly.
not because I didn't value the acts, but because he had no plan to sustain them. You cannot run a church on soup and sentiment. He drained us. We're barely keeping the lights on.
Truth in his voice, resentment in his posture. I turned toward the Heliarch's desk. Clean, too clean. A few folders stacked neatly, empty. A memory cylinder sat on a silk mat, scrubbed. No fingerprints. I pulled my arcanum compass and scanned the desk, slow and methodical. The runes etched along its edge pulsed, dim gold against my gloves. Ping, lower drawer. I knelt, pulled it open. Inside, a medallion, round, heavy, black as obsidian and etched with a symbol I'd never seen before. A sun with jagged rays, old and wrong. The lines moved, even in stillness. My stomach twisted before I even touched it. I scanned it with my echo rig, projecting light and glyph translation across the device's face. At first, nothing. Then, static. A sharp crack in my ear.
Unregistered glyph detected. Origin. Pre-Terran. Potential root. Nocturnic lexicon. Translation. Unknown. Warning. Exposure may corrupt memory pathways.
The rig sputtered, locked, then purged a portion of itself before the virus could spread. I cursed and dropped the scan.
Heretic stone,
Grelm hissed.
It should be destroyed immediately.
I bagged it in a sealed pouch, metal clinking as it closed. You don't get to decide that, I said. This falls under arcanum jurisdiction.
This church answers to the ecclesia.
No, I said. It answers to truth. You just haven't met it in a while. I turned to leave. Grelm followed, protesting behind me. But his voice already sounded smaller, like the chamber had started closing in around him. I left the church with a head full of ash and the stink of incense stuck to my coat. I'd had enough of priests whispering rules in my ear like they still ran the empire. Every step toward the door felt like peeling off a layer of rot. Before I crossed the threshold, I turned back and said it plain. Interfere with the crime scene again. Move so much as a speck of blood without clearance. And the Arcanum won't send another inspector. They'll send a purge team. Then I walked out into the rain, not waiting for their reaction. I already knew what it would be. Silence, laced with fear. The kind they'd pray about later when they thought no one was listening.